We've been looking at the parables of Jesus, peeking in at the parables of Jesus. Parable is a little story that answers big questions. It gives us a picture of the kingdom of God, and it gives us a picture of the God of the kingdom. And when it comes to reading the parables and understanding them, you need to know who Jesus was telling the parable to. Then you'll know why he was telling the parable. Look at Luke 15, verses 1 and 2. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to him, and the Pharisees and the scribes grumbled, saying, "This man receives sinners and eats with them." Almost every time Jesus told a story, there were two groups of people hanging around him. There was what we would call the rebellious crowd, and there was also the religious crowd. Now the Pharisees considered themselves to be in the right crowd. They were the crowd that went to church and gave offerings and did good deeds. They were the crowd that dotted the I's and crossed the T's. They thought they were in the right crowd. And what drove them nuts about Jesus was he never hung around the right crowd. He always hung around the wrong crowd, and they didn't understand it. They said, "You claim to be the Son of God, but you hang around with sinners. You claim to be the Son of God, but you hang around with people who don't go to church. You claim to be the Son of God, but you hang around with people who don't even have time for God. Why do you hang around with sinful people?" One commentator put it this way: people who were nothing like Jesus liked Jesus. And Jesus liked people who were nothing like him. Sinners would flock to hear Jesus, but Pharisees would get in the ear of Jesus. Sinners were hungry for truth, but the Pharisees were hungry for blood. And the reason why the Pharisees didn't understand why Jesus hung around with sinners is because, first of all, they didn't see sinners the way God sees sinners, and secondly, they didn't see themselves as sinners. They saw sinners the way we often see sinners. And let's just be honest. We all have a particular category that we pick out. For some of you, it's the prostitute or the adulterer or the homosexual or the thief or the terrorist, and we look down on them and see them as losers. But God doesn't look at sinners as being losers. God looks at sinners as being lost. Hanging around with a crowd is very dangerous if you're not spiritually mature enough to influence them rather than them influencing in you, and I get that. But where you and I have been told all of our lives, don't ever hang around with the wrong crowd, let me tell you what you're going to learn in this parable. It's not the job of those who think they're in the right crowd to look down on those they think are in the wrong crowd. That's not our job. If you're here this morning and you say, "I'm in the right crowd, look where I am today, I'm in church, I'm with the right crowd." It's the job of the right crowd to look for the wrong crowd, because there's only one difference between the right crowd and the wrong crowd. And here's the difference. The right crowd has been found. The wrong crowd is still lost. That's the only difference. So it's not the job of the right crowd to look down on the wrong crowd. It's the job of the right crowd to look for the lost crowd and share with them how to get into the right crowd. Jesus tells a parable, and he tells those of us who think we're in the right crowd, here's how you ought to see people who are in the wrong crowd. Here's how you ought to see people who are lost. First of all, we ought to have a consternation over people who are lost. We ought to have a consternation over people who are lost. Consternation means we ought to be all worked up about lost people. Look at verse 3. So he told them this parable. What man of you, having 100 sheep, if he has lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in the open country and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? Jesus asks a rhetorical question here, because for once, Jesus finally found something everyone could agree on. Everybody agreed that a shepherd needs to go after a lost sheep. Everybody knows that a good shepherd doesn't care about some of the flock or most of the flock. A good shepherd cares about all of the flock. So they all agree that a good shepherd will go after a lost sheep. Now what's so sad about sheep that's lost is this. A sheep that's lost doesn't even know it's lost. That's why when a sheep wanders off, and it's a natural tendency for sheep to wander away, the reason why a lost sheep will never come back, two reasons. One, they don't even know they're lost. And two, even if they did, they don't know how to find their way back. It's a bad thing to be lost, really bad. But do you know it's even worse? When you don't even realize it. Then Jesus says, let's talk about a lost coin. Look at verse 8. Or what woman, having 10 silver coins, if she loses one coin, does not light a lamp and sweep the house and seek diligently until she finds it? Now Jesus is describing a very typical situation back in his day. There was a woman who was not very rich. She lived in a very small Palestinian home, which would be about the size of a one-car garage with no windows and only had one door. So most of the time, the home was dark and very cold. The woman only has 10 coins to her name, but she loses one. Now that one coin is not worth very much, but all of a sudden she realizes, my coin's lost. I had 10, but now only 9. One of my coins is lost. And Jesus said she immediately begins to turn her house upside down and inside out, trying to find that one lost coin. Now this raises a big question. Why did the shepherd go look for one sheep, and why would a woman go look for one coin? And there's only one explanation. Because it bothered them and burdened them that they were lost. Now let me ask a simple question. How did the shepherd know the sheep was lost? How did the woman know the coin was lost? How did they know? They counted. Hey, I had 100 sheep, now I've got 99. One sheep is missing. Hey, I had 10 coins, but now I've got 9. One coin is missing. The shepherd counted the sheep, the woman counted the coins. Makes me wonder sometimes when I hear people say, I don't know why the church is so interested in numbers. I'll tell you why. Because God is concerned about numbers. I mean, people are not numbers, but numbers many times are people. And the reason why we ought to be concerned about numbers in our churches is because people count. So why was it a big deal to the shepherd? Because it was his sheep. Why was it a big deal to the woman? Because it was her coin. And what Jesus is saying is this. Every person on this planet belongs to God. Doesn't matter if they go to church or don't go to church. God made every person. God created every person. God owns every person. Every person belongs to God. And God says, listen, I care about people who are lost. Lost people matter to God, and what matters to God ought to matter to us. So I'm telling us as a church, you don't get the mind of God if you're sitting next to an empty seat right now. It ought to bother you. Are you sitting next to an empty seat? Is there an empty seat next to you? If you're sitting next to an empty seat right now, it ought to burden you. It ought to break your heart. Because every empty seat is somebody out there who's lost. They don't even know that they're lost. And nobody's cared enough to say, you're lost. Let me help you be found by Jesus today. We come in here, and if we're 80% filled, we think we ought to be thrilled. But if Jesus came in here, he'd say, why isn't my house full? What are these empty seats here? Because God cares about lost people. Lost people matter to God, and so they should matter to us. There ought to be consternation in this church. Every one of us should leave here each week burdened over the empty seats in this building. There ought to be consternation in every Sunday school class and life group. There ought to be consternation in your family over the condition of your neighborhood. There ought to be consternation in your heart over the people you work with who are lost. There ought to be consternation in our hearts over lost people. Jesus also tells us something else. We ought to focus our concentration on people who are lost. We ought to focus our concentration on people who are lost. Look at what the shepherd does in verse 4. What man of you having 100 sheep, if he has lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in the open country and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? Here's a shepherd and he's missing one sheep. He leaves the 99 and goes looking for the one lost sheep. Look at what the woman does in verse 8. Or what woman having 10 silver coins, if she loses one coin, does not light a lamp and sweep the house and seek diligently until she finds it? She's not concerned that she has 9 coins left. She's got to find that one lost coin. By the way, when it says that she searched diligently, the word diligently is a really interesting word. It's only used one time in the Bible, and it's right here. And it literally means obeying the command of a king. In Bible days, if a king gave you a command, it instantly became a matter of life and death. If you didn't carry out the command of the king, you could be put to death. That's the word used here. This woman saw the search for the lost coin as a matter of life and death. Let me tell you what's so amazing. You would think it must be a valuable coin, but not so. The Greek word for coin here is the word drachma. Do you know what the worth of that coin would be today? 18 cents. 18 cents. You lost one sheep, you still have 99. To business people, losing 1 out of 100 is not bad. I don't know what your business may be, but what if I came to you and offered a guaranteed 99% profit margin? You'd hop on it, right? Or if I came to you and offered a guaranteed 90% profit margin, you'd be in. You go into a grocery store today, and do you know what the profit margin is? 1 to 2%. So why would a shepherd go after that one coin? Why would a woman worry about that one sheep? Why would the woman worry about one coin? Because one sheep by itself was not valuable, and the one coin was only worth 18 cents. So why did they do that? There's only one reason. They had a love and a compassion and a passion for the one that was lost. Please hear this. Do you know what made that one sheep so valuable? Do you know what made that one coin so valuable? It was the love and care and concern of the one who lost it. Hear this. Jesus does not love us because we're valuable. We're valuable because Jesus loves us. Why did God send Jesus? To look for you. Why did God send Jesus? Because we were lost and we needed to be found. Why did God send Jesus? Because he cares about the one who's lost. And by the way, something else the sheep and the coin had in common, they both were found. Can I let you in on a little secret? Lost things don't find themselves. We've all said this at one time or another, and it's one of the dumbest things we can say. For example, you've lost your keys, and you say, oh, they'll turn up. As if one night you're in bed and your keys come walking in the door saying, did you miss me yet? No, they're not going to just turn up. Lost things don't find themselves, they're found. And here's the point Jesus is making. If you're in the family of God today, it's not because you found God, but because God found you. You don't find God. God finds you. And do you know why? Because he's looking. Let me tell you why this is such a big deal. Let me tell you the greatest danger this church will ever face. It's the reason why churches die. Churches die because there's a tendency to focus inward. Let's just take care of what we've got. We've got a good thing going. But as long as we have the heart and mind of God, we will never focus inward. We will always focus outward. As long as we have the heart and the mind of God, we won't walk out of here smugly satisfied that at least that seat was filled. As long as we have the heart and mind of God, we will be concerned about the empty seats, and we will concentrate on those who are lost. And then thirdly, we should express celebration when lost people are found. We should express celebration when lost people are found. Now, if you'd been listening to this story, you would have laughed at how Jesus ended it, because the way he ends the story is rather unrealistic. As a matter of fact, if you'd been listening to this story, you would have been drawn into the conclusion, and then you would have been scratching your head thinking it doesn't make any sense. Because look at what the shepherd does. He throws a party. And look at what the woman does. She throws a party. Look at verse 6. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and his neighbors, saying to them, rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost. Now, when you called friends and neighbors together, it was the law of hospitality in the Middle East that you had to provide a spread. You had to have a buffet. He calls his friends and neighbors together and says, rejoice with me, I have found my sheep that was lost. Then verse 9, and when she has found it, she calls together her friends and neighbors, saying, rejoice with me, for I have found the coin that I had lost. Now just imagine, the shepherd throws a big party and all of his friends and neighbors come to this big buffet, but they don't know why he's throwing a party. So they sit down to eat, and one of the neighbors finally asks, so what's the occasion for such a big party? And the shepherd points to this old scraggly sheep and says, this sheep was lost, but I found him. That's it. All this for that one sheep? Or how about the woman? The one coin was worth 18 cents. Listen, this is what's amazing. Celebrating a sheep is strange enough, but this woman's throwing a party over a coin. The coin is less worth than the sheep. As a matter of fact, the woman threw a party that cost more than the coin that she had lost. Why does Jesus put that in the story? He doesn't have to, because he wants us to know that lost people matter to God. And what matters to God should matter to us. And heaven is happy. Heaven throws a party when heaven celebrates only once, when lost people are found. And the way he concludes this story, remember who's listening to this story. Look at verse 7. Just so I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance. Think about it. Every time one sinner repents, every time one person gets right with God, every time one person surrenders his life to Christ, every time one lost person is found, God says it's party time. I got to thinking the other day, the angels are always in the presence of God. 24/7, they're in the presence of God. Can you imagine the angels as they look over and God rises from his throne and he's happy and dancing when the angel says, there he goes again. Somebody just got found. Somebody just repented. Somebody just surrendered to Christ. Listen, nothing makes God sadder than people who are lost. And nothing makes God gladder than when lost people are found. Jesus said God throws a party every time lost people are found. God is not happy when we tell him how right we are. God is happy when we confess how bad we are. God doesn't get happy because we're in the right crowd. God gets happy when the right crowd goes looking for the wrong crowd to help them get into the right crowd. So now I hope a light is coming on in this room. It's because lost people matter to God, and what matters to God should matter to us. It's because heaven is happy when lost people are found, and we ought to want to make heaven happy. That's why the most important question that a church should always be asking is this question. The question a church should always be asking is not, how much is this going to cost? The question a church should always be asking is not, will everybody like this? The most important question a church should be asking every week is, will this make me uncomfortable? The most important question a church should be asking every week is, if we do this, will more lost people be found? If we do this, will more people come into a saving relationship with Christ? If we do this, will more people's lives be changed by the gospel of Christ? Those lost people matter to God. And what matters to God should matter to us. And heaven is happy when lost people get found.